I was just a street musician until the night a Mafia boss rolled down his window and changed my life forever. What happens when a struggling singer becomes the wife of the city's most dangerous man? Watch to discover how our forbidden love survived bullets, betrayal, and the FBI's best efforts to tear us apart. I used to count my days by subway trains and loose change. Every morning, I'd drag my old guitar 3 blocks from my tiny apartment to the 7th Street station. The curved walls made my just okay voice sound almost good. When things went well, I'd get enough money for food and half my power bill. When they didn't, I'd only have enough for cheap noodles. I did the same thing every day, play until my fingers hurt, count my coins on the walk home, then fall asleep dreaming about music deals that never came. Sometimes in my dreams, someone important would find me playing and take me away to make records and play big shows. But then my alarm clock would buzz loudly, and I'd wake up back in my real life. "Keep following that dream, honey," my mom would say when we talked each week. Her voice always had that worried sound that parents use when they think you're making bad choices. I never told her how close I was to giving up, how all my unpaid bills made it hard to even sing anymore. My apartment was so small I could touch both walls with my arms stretched out. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the heater only worked half the time. But it was mine, and the rent was cheap enough that I could keep trying to make it as a singer for 1 more month, then 1 more after that. At night, I'd sit on my fire escape and watch people walk by below. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, someone waiting for them. I wrote songs about them. The tired nurse shuffling home at dawn, the old man who fed pigeons with bread from his pocket, the kids who played hopscotch on the cracked sidewalk. Some days were harder than others, like when the coffee shop down the street turned me down for a weekend gig, or when my landlord slipped another late notice under my door. I'd pull out the shoebox where I kept newspaper clippings about famous singers who started with nothing. "If they can do it, so can I," I'd whisper to myself. But truth is, I was getting tired. My friends from music school had all moved on, teaching piano lessons to kids, working in offices, getting married. They stopped calling after a while. It's hard to keep inviting someone who never has money to go anywhere. Last Tuesday, I made exactly $12.37 after playing for 6 hours. My fingers were bleeding by the end. Walking home, I passed a help wanted sign in a diner window and found myself stopping to look. Maybe it was time to grow up. Maybe some dreams aren't meant to come true. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. I didn't know that the next day, a black car would pull up beside me, and my whole life would flip upside down. All I knew was that I was hungry, I was lonely, and I was running out of reasons to keep singing. It was raining the night everything changed. Not just a light drizzle, but the kind of hard, cold rain that turns the city into a blur of wet lights and makes your bones ache. The kind of rain that keeps people home and subway stations empty. I'd been playing for 4 hours and had made exactly $7.36, not even enough for tomorrow's breakfast. The few people who passed by hurried with their heads down, ignoring the sad girl with the guitar whose case held barely enough coins to make a sound when they rattled. My fingers were numb, my voice was giving out, and my stomach growled so loud it almost drowned out my last song. It was time to give up, at least for today. I was packing up my guitar, trying to keep it dry under my thin jacket, when I heard the soft purr of a car engine. A black car, so shiny the raindrops seemed to dance on its roof, pulled up to the curb. It was long and clean and looked like it cost more than I'd make in 10 years of singing on this corner. The car sat there, engine running, for what felt like forever. I couldn't see through the dark windows, but I could feel someone watching me. My heart beat faster. Should I run? But where would I go in this rain? Then the back window rolled down, just a few inches. Not enough to see who was inside, just enough to let out a deep voice that didn't ask but told, "Play something else." I froze, my guitar half in its case. The voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't really nice either. It was used to being obeyed. "I was just leaving," I said, looking at the puddle forming around my feet. "Play something else," the voice repeated. "Something you wrote yourself." My hands shook as I pulled my guitar back out. Water dripped from my hair onto the strings. I had a song, one I'd been working on for months, but never had the guts to play for anyone. It was too real, too much like opening my diary for strangers to read. But something about the voice, the rain, the late hour, and my empty bank account made me brave, or maybe just desperate. So I played. I sang about feeling lost in a city that never sleeps, but never really sees you either. About dreams that stay just out of reach no matter how high you jump. When I finished, the window rolled down all the way. I still couldn't see much, just the outline of a man sitting in the back seat. He was big, with wide shoulders and a head that seemed to fill the space. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, almost soft. "Maya," I answered, holding my guitar tight like it might protect me. A hand appeared in the window. It dropped something that landed with a soft thud at my feet. A thick envelope made of fancy paper. "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, Vesuvio's on Mulberry Street," the voice said. "What? Why?" I stammered, not reaching for the envelope. "Because I liked your song," he said, like that explained everything. Before I could ask anything else, the window rolled up, and the car pulled away, sending a wave of dirty water onto my already soaked shoes. I stood there for a long minute, rain washing over me, staring at the envelope. Finally, I picked it up. It was heavy. I tucked it inside my jacket and ran for the subway, my mind spinning with questions. Safe in my tiny apartment, I put my guitar down and pulled out the envelope. My hands left wet marks on the fancy paper. I opened it slowly, afraid of what might be inside. Money. So much money. I spread the bills on my bed and counted them twice. $5,000. More money than I'd made in the last 6 months of playing. Along with the money was a small white card with just a name printed in black letters, Vincenzo Moretti. I'd never heard the name before, but something about it made my skin prickle. I grabbed my old laptop and typed the name into a search. The screen filled with news stories and pictures. My heart sank as I read, Vincenzo Moretti, head of one of the biggest crime families in the city. The kind of man police watched but couldn't touch. The kind who owned judges and politicians. The kind who made people disappear. And he wanted to meet me tomorrow. I sat on my bed, the money spread around me, and tried to think. The smart thing would be to throw the money away, forget about Vesuvio's, and never play at that subway stop again. Maybe move to another part of town, or another town entirely. But then, I looked around my sad little apartment. The ceiling that leaked, the window that wouldn't close all the way, the empty fridge, the pile of bills with red past due stamps on them. $5,000 would pay my rent for months, would keep the lights on and my belly full, would give me time to maybe make a demo of my songs, to try one more time to make my music dreams come true before giving up for good. What did he want from me? Just to hear me sing again? That didn't seem so bad. Maybe he was just a rich guy who liked music. Maybe the scary stories online were just that. Stories. I knew I was lying to myself. Men like Vincenzo Moretti didn't give money to street singers just because they liked a song. He wanted something. But what? I put the money back in the envelope and hid it under my mattress. I took a hot shower, a luxury I usually skip to save on the water bill, and got into bed. I'd decide in the morning what to do. But as I lay in the dark listening to the rain, I already knew. Tomorrow night at 8, I'd be at Vesuvio's. Not because I was brave, but because I was tired of being poor and ignored. Because for the first time in years, something interesting was happening to me. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the weird, scary chance I'd been waiting for. I fell asleep dreaming of black cars and men with voices that commanded the rain to stop. And in my dream, I wasn't afraid at all. I spent the whole next day talking myself into and out of going to meet Vincenzo Moretti. 1 minute I'd be putting on makeup, the next I'd be washing it off. Sure, I was making a huge mistake. By 7 o'clock, my tiny bathroom floor was covered in discarded outfits. Everything I owned seemed either too cheap or too showy, too desperate or too careless. I finally settled on a simple black dress I'd bought for a music school friend's wedding years ago. It was the nicest thing I owned, though it hung a little loose now. I hadn't been eating well lately. The taxi driver raised his eyebrows when I gave him the address. Vesuvio's? Fancy date, huh? He said, eyeing my worn coat in the rearview mirror. Just a meeting, I replied, trying to sound like I went to fancy restaurants all the time. My stomach twisted as the taxi pulled up to the curb. Vesuvio's glowed with warm golden light, its windows revealing glimpses of crystal glasses and white tablecloths. Men in suits held doors for women in dresses that probably cost more than my yearly rent. I almost told the driver to take me back home. "This is it, miss," he said, turning to look at me. I handed him a 20 from the envelope. "Keep the change," I said, trying to sound confident as I stepped out into the cold night air. The doorman looked me up and down but said nothing as he opened the heavy door. Inside, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the soft clink of silverware on fine china. A man in a black suit stood behind a small podium, his eyes narrowing slightly as I approached. "May I help you?" he asked in a way that suggested he doubted he could. "I'm here to meet someone," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "Vincenzo Moretti." The change was instant. His eyebrows shot up, and he stood straighter. "Of course, Mr. Moretti is expecting you. Please, follow me." He led me through the dining room, past tables of rich people who seemed to know each other. I felt their eyes on me, curious and judging. Who was this girl in the slightly too big dress going to meet the man at the corner table? And there he was, not hidden in shadow like in the car, but fully visible under the warm restaurant lights. Vincenzo Moretti sat with his back to the wall, facing the room. He looked about 50, with thick salt and pepper hair cut close and neat. His face was handsome in a rough way, with a strong jaw and deep lines around his eyes. A thin scar ran from his right temple down to his cheekbone, the kind you don't get from shaving. He stood as I approached, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered frame in a suit that probably cost more than everything I owned. He wasn't movie star handsome, but he had the kind of face that made you look twice, that commanded attention. "Maya," he said, my name sounding different in his deep voice, more important somehow. "You came." I was curious, I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt as I slid into the seat across from him. "Curiosity is dangerous in my world," he said, his dark eyes never leaving my face. A waiter appeared with a bottle of wine, pouring without being asked. I noticed the restaurant had gotten quieter, conversations now hushed as people stole glances at our table. "Then why am I here?" I asked, wrapping my fingers around the stem of the wine glass, needing something to hold on to. Moretti took a sip of his wine, studying me over the rim of his glass. "You have talent," he said finally, raw, untrained, but real. "It's rare." "Not rare enough to get a record deal," I said before I could stop myself. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "The music industry is full of fools." The waiter returned with food we hadn't ordered. Tiny, perfect plates that looked like art. I didn't recognize half of it, but my empty stomach didn't care. Why did you give me all that money? I asked, finally voicing the question that had kept me awake. He set down his fork. I need something from you. My heart sank. Here it was. Whatever awful thing he wanted in return for his $5,000. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. I'm not that kind of girl. This time he did smile, a flash of white teeth that didn't reach his eyes. I'm not that kind of man. At least, not anymore. A different kind of fear crept up my spine. What did he want then? Was I supposed to smuggle drugs? Lie to the police? I need a wife, he said, his voice matter of fact, like he was asking for the salt. I nearly choked on my wine. Excuse me? The feds are circling. A family man looks better to juries and judges. You need money. I need respectability. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. From tonight, you're my bride. To the world, at least. I stared at him, sure I had misheard. You want to marry me? You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you're broke. I know you're alone. No family in the city. Few friends. I know you're stubborn, or you would have given up on your music by now. The way he listed facts about my life made my skin crawl. Had he been watching me? Having me followed? This is crazy, I whispered, aware of the other diners who might be listening. This is business, he corrected. A simple arrangement. You play the role of devoted wife, attend events on my arm, live in my home. In return, I pay your bills, fund your music, whatever you want. And if I say no? His face didn't change. Then you go back to singing for Pennies, and I find someone else. A voice in my head screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this man and his crazy offer as possible. But another voice, quieter but more persuasive, whispered, When will you get another chance like this? Why me? I asked, genuinely puzzled. You could hire anyone, an actress, a model. Something flickered across his face, so quick I almost missed it. Your song, he said simply. It reminded me of something I lost long ago. The waiter appeared at his elbow, whispering something in his ear. Moretti nodded, then turned back to me. I need an answer now, Maya. Yes or no? I looked around the restaurant, at the beautiful people in their beautiful clothes, eating beautiful food without worrying if the power would be on when they got home. Then I looked at Moretti, at his scarred face and dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. What exactly would this involve? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. You move into my home tonight. We're seen together in public. You wear my ring. That's all. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a diamond ring that sparkled even in the dim light. No physical expectations. Separate bedrooms. Just the appearance of a relationship. For how long? A year. Maybe 2. Until certain legal matters are resolved. My mind raced. A year or 2 of financial security. Of not counting pennies. Of maybe making the music I'd dreamed of. If I do this, I said slowly, I have conditions. His eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised that I would negotiate. Go on. I want my own money, not just allowance from you. In my name. He nodded once. I want to keep making music. My way. Another nod. And if at any point I feel unsafe or uncomfortable, I can walk away. No questions, no following me, no revenge. He studied me for a long moment. You've seen too many movies about men like me. Am I wrong? I challenged. You have my word, he said, his voice solemn. Now, do we have a deal? I looked down at the ring, then back at his face. This was insane. I was insane for even considering it. But what was waiting for me back at my apartment? More bills, more rejection. More nights counting coins and eating ramen. Yes, I said, my voice barely audible even to my own ears, We have a deal. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It was heavy and cold and way too big for my thin hand. From tonight, you're Mrs. Moretti, he said, raising his glass in a toast. As I raised mine to meet it, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or somehow, against all odds, found my way out. That first night in Vincenzo Moretti's home felt like stepping into a dream. His driver took us from the restaurant to a tall building with a doorman who tipped his hat and called me Mrs. Moretti without a hint of surprise. We rode an elevator all the way to the top floor, where Vincenzo used a special key to open the doors directly into his apartment. No, not apartment. Palace. The entryway alone was bigger than my entire old place. The floors were made of shiny stone that clicked under my worn shoes. Lights glowed from fancy glass fixtures that hung from high ceilings. Through huge windows, the city spread out below us like a carpet of stars. "This is your home now," Vincenzo said, watching my face as I turned in slow circles, trying to take it all in. "It's big," I managed to say, my voice small in the vast space. "The guest room is this way," he said, leading me down a hallway lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom 3 times the size of my old one, with a bed that could fit 4 people and windows overlooking Central Park. "Your things will be brought tomorrow," he said. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit you for now." "My things?" I repeated, confused. "I took the liberty of having your apartment packed up this afternoon." A chill ran through me. How easily he had erased my old life, how completely he had taken control. "You were that sure I'd say yes?" His face gave away nothing. "I'm a man who prepares for all outcomes. Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow will be a busy day." He left me alone in that huge room, in a stranger's nightgown that felt too soft against my skin, staring at the ceiling and wondering what I had gotten myself into. Our first weeks together were awkward, like a carefully choreographed dance where neither partner knew all the steps. Vincenzo would leave early, before I woke up, and return late. We'd pass each other in hallways or share silent dinners where the only sounds were forks against plates and the tick of a grandfather clock in the corner. I learned his habits by watching. He drank his coffee black. He read the newspaper from back to front. He straightened his silverware 3 times before eating. Small things that made this scary man seem almost normal. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered into his library, a room with walls covered in books from floor to ceiling. I ran my fingers along the spines, surprised to find poetry mixed with history, science fiction beside classic novels. "Couldn't sleep?" His voice came from the doorway, making me jump. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snoop," I said quickly. "It's your home too," he replied, coming into the room. He wore a robe over silk pajamas, his hair slightly mussed. It made him look younger, less severe. "Do you read much?" "When I can," I admitted. Books were always cheaper than movies. He went to a shelf and pulled down a thin volume. "Try this one," he said, handing it to me. It was a book of poems in Italian. "I can't read Italian," I said, opening it anyway. The pages were old and soft. "Then I'll have to read it to you sometime," he said. And for the first time since I'd met him, his smile seemed real. After that night, something shifted between us. We still weren't friends. Not exactly, but the silence became less heavy. I discovered unexpected things about him. He spoke 4 languages, played chess like a master, and knew more about classical music than anyone I'd ever met. He never talked about his business, creating a wall between that world and our strange domestic life. "Why don't you have a real wife?" I asked one evening as we shared dinner on the balcony. The question had been burning in me for weeks. His face grew still, and I thought he might not answer. Then. I did once. Cancer took her 15 years ago. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. You're singing, he said after a long pause. Something in your voice reminded me of hers. The admission hung in the air between us, fragile as spider silk. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. But something warm unfurled in my chest. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. I grew comfortable in my role as Mrs. Moretti. I learned which fork to use at fancy dinners, how to make small talk with politicians' wives, how to smile just the right amount for the society photographers who always seemed to be watching us. In return, I brought life into Vincenzo's museum-like home. I played guitar in the living room, left books open on tables, sang in the shower. At first, he acted annoyed by the changes, but I would catch him sometimes, listening to me practice with his eyes closed, a small smile on his lips. I still made music, but now in a small studio Vincenzo had set up for me in a spare room. My songs changed, less about struggle, more about feeling caught between worlds. I recorded demos that actually sounded professional, and for the first time, people in the industry started to pay attention. You're good, Vincenzo said one night after listening to a new song I'd been working on. You could have made it without all this. He gestured to the penthouse around us. Maybe, I said, not believing it. But I was running out of time. And hope. He touched my hand then, just briefly, his fingers warm against mine. Both are renewable resources, Maya. I began to see beneath Vincenzo's hard exterior, the way he always asked the doorman about his son's baseball games. How he remembered the birthdays of every person who worked for him. The time I found him reading a dog-eared paperback of poetry, his lips moving silently with the words. But there were darker moments too. The hushed phone calls he took in his office, door locked. The men who came to see him late at night, their faces grim. The way conversation would stop when I entered a room full of his business associates. One afternoon, I came home early from a recording session to find him in his study with Paolo, his right-hand man. They were talking in rapid Italian, but stopped when they saw me. Sorry to interrupt, I said, backing toward the door. It's fine, we were finished, Vincenzo said, but his eyes were cold in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. Paolo looked at me with open suspicion as he left. They don't like me, I said after Paolo was gone. You're friends. They don't have to like you, Vincenzo replied. They just have to respect you. And do they? I asked. They respect me, he said simply. That night we attended a gallery opening downtown. Vincenzo wore his usual perfect suit, while I wore a new dress that cost more than 6 months' rent at my old place. As we moved through the crowd, I noticed how people parted for him, how they smiled too widely, laughed too loudly at his comments. They're afraid of you, I whispered as we looked at a painting that was just splashes of color. Yes, he agreed, without shame. Should I be? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He turned to me, his eyes serious. No, never. Something in the way he said it made my heart beat faster. For the first time, I wondered if our arrangement was changing into something neither of us had planned for. The night ended in chaos. As we were leaving, the sharp crack of gunshots split the air. Vincenzo reacted instantly, pushing me to the floor and covering my body with his own as his security team rushed in. People screamed and ran. I smelled gunpowder and the iron scent of blood. Later, in his penthouse, I watched with shaking hands as a private doctor removed pieces of glass from Vincenzo's shoulder and stitched a cut on his arm. You should leave, he said quietly as the doctor packed up his bag. This isn't your fight. I looked at the blood on his shirt, at the new lines of pain around his mouth, and made a choice I hadn't planned to make. I took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I'm not going anywhere, I said. That night, for the first time, I didn't sleep in the guest room. As Vincenzo held me, his heartbeat strong against my cheek, I realized that our pretend marriage had somehow, when I wasn't looking, started to feel real. I woke up the next morning in Vincenzo's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, I just watched him sleep. In rest, the hard lines of his face softened, making him look younger and less dangerous. The scar on his cheek was silver in the morning light. I traced it with my eyes, wondering how many other scars he carried inside and out. He stirred, dark eyes opening to find me watching him. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Before I could answer, his phone rang. The moment broke. He was back to being Vincenzo Moretti, the man everyone feared, taking calls and giving orders while I slipped away to shower. When I came out, he was gone, a note on the bedside table. "Business, back tonight." Just like that, we were back to our routine, except nothing felt routine anymore. I made coffee and opened the curtains in the living room, nearly dropping my mug when I saw the newspaper someone had left on the coffee table. There, on the front page, was a picture of us from last night. Me in Vincenzo's arms as he shielded me from the gunfire, my face clear, his profile sharp. The headline read, "Moretti's Mystery Bride, True Love or Convenient Alibi." My hands shook as I read the article. It talked about our whirlwind romance, questioning how a street musician had caught the eye of one of the city's most notorious men. It mentioned the timing, just as federal investigators were closing in on Vincenzo's business dealings. It called me his surprise trump card, and speculated whether our marriage was real or just a clever ploy to make him look sympathetic to potential jurors. I put down the paper, feeling sick. Until now, I'd existed in a bubble with Vincenzo, our arrangement private despite our public appearances. Now everyone was looking at me, judging me, trying to figure out who I really was and what I was doing with him. My phone rang. My new phone. The fancy one Vincenzo had given me. It was my mother. "Maya, is that you in the paper? With that man?" Her voice trembled with worry and something else. Disappointment. "Mom, I can explain," I started, though I had no idea how to explain any of this. "They're saying that he's in the Mafia, that he hurts people." I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. "It's complicated." "Are you in trouble? Do you need help? I can wire money." "I don't need money, Mom," I said, looking around the penthouse that cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. "I'm fine, really." "Are you safe?" she asked, her voice small. Was I? I thought about Vincenzo shielding me with his body, taking glass and bullets meant for me. "Yes," I said. "I'm safe." She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way she kept asking questions, her voice getting higher with each one. We ended the call with her promising to pray for me, and me promising to be careful. I felt the distance between us growing wider with every word. I tried to distract myself by working on a new song, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself pacing the apartment, jumping at every sound. By afternoon, I needed to get out, to breathe air that didn't smell like Vincenzo's cologne and expensive furniture polish. The doorman looked surprised when I asked him to hail me a cab. "Mr. Moretti likes us to call his driver for you, Mrs. Moretti." "I'll be fine," I insisted. "Just a quick trip to the park." The fresh air helped clear my head. I walked through Central Park, watching children play and couples hold hands, everyone living normal lives. I sat on a bench near the lake, closing my eyes and tilting my face to the sun. Maya Rivera? Or should I say, Mrs. Moretti now? I opened my eyes to find a man in a plain suit standing in front of me. He wasn't smiling. "Do I know you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He sat down beside me, not waiting for an invitation. "Special Agent Thomas Reeves, FBI." He didn't show a badge, but I believed him. He had that clean-cut, serious look that screamed law enforcement. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Just to talk." He looked out at the lake, his profile sharp against the blue sky. "You know what he is, right?" "My husband," I replied, the word still strange on my tongue. "A killer. A criminal. The head of one of the city's most dangerous crime families." He turned to look at me, his eyes hard. "We've been building a case against him for years. Racketeering, money laundering, assault. Murder." "Stop," I said, standing up. "I don't want to hear this." "We can help you, Maya," he said, standing too, his voice softer now. "You don't have to be part of this. You can walk away." "You don't know anything about me or my life," I said, backing away from him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "When you're ready to talk, and you will be, eventually, call this number. Day or night." I didn't take the card, but he set it on the bench where I had been sitting. "He's using you, Maya. You're just a prop to him, a pretty wife to show the world when he needs to look respectable. When he's done, he'll discard you." His words hit me like stones, each one leaving a bruise. I turned and walked away, moving faster until I was almost running. I didn't stop until I reached the street, where I hailed a cab with shaking hands. Back at the penthouse, I found Paolo waiting in the living room. His face, always stern, looked even more disapproving than usual. "Where have you been?" he demanded, as if he had the right. "Out," I said, not stopping as I headed for the bedroom. He followed me, his footsteps heavy on the marble floor. "Without security? Without telling anyone?" His accent grew thicker with his anger. "Do you know what could happen if someone took you? Used you against him?" I turned to face him. "No one's going to kidnap me, Paolo. I'm not important enough." "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping. "Things are happening. Bad things. Vincenzo has enemies moving against him, and now they all know his weakness." "I'm not his weakness," I snapped. "I'm just his wife," Paolo finished for me. "At least, that's what everyone believes now." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "I've known Vincenzo for 20 years. I've seen him build everything he has from nothing, and now you come along, and suddenly he's distracted, making mistakes, putting himself in danger." "That's not my fault," I said, but my voice wavered. "Isn't it?" Paolo's eyes narrowed. "He was shot protecting you. The papers are full of pictures of him looking like a lovesick fool. His enemies smell blood in the water." "What do you want from me?" I asked, tired of his accusations. "I want you to be what you were supposed to be. A convenient story, nothing more. Not a liability." Before I could answer, the door opened and Vincenzo walked in. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as he looked between Paolo and me, his face unreadable. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Just explaining some facts of life to your wife," Paolo said, not backing down. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. "Wait for me in the study." Paolo gave me one last hard look before leaving. When he was gone, Vincenzo came to me, his hands gentle as they framed my face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I met an FBI agent today," I blurted out. "In the park. He knew who I was." Vincenzo's hands dropped, his expression changing. "What did he say? What did he want?" "Me," I said simply. "He thinks I'll turn on you." "And will you?" His eyes searched mine, looking for the truth. "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted. "I don't know what's real and what's pretend between us." From the study, we heard Paolo's raised voice on the phone, speaking rapid Italian. Vincenzo looked toward the sound, then back at me. "We'll talk later," he promised, squeezing my hand before walking away. That night, I lay awake in our bed, listening to Vincenzo's steady breathing beside me. A week ago, Everything had seemed simple. Our arrangement, the roles we played, the lines we wouldn't cross. Now nothing was clear. I thought about my mother's fear, Agent Reeves's warnings, Paolo's anger. I thought about the gunshots and the blood on Vincenzo's shirt, about his hands, gentle on my face but capable of violence I couldn't imagine. For the first time since moving into this golden cage, I allowed myself to wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake. If in trying to escape one trap, I'd walked willingly into another, far more dangerous one. The days after meeting Agent Reeves stretched into weeks, each one pulling me further into doubt. Vincenzo seemed to sense the change in me, the new distance I kept between us. He didn't push, didn't ask questions, just watched me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. One morning, I woke early and slipped out of bed without waking him. I took my guitar from its case, the same beat-up one I'd played on street corners, and headed to the living room. My fingers found the strings like old friends, and I began to play quietly, a melody that had been haunting me for days. It wasn't a happy song. It was about being lost between two worlds, about not recognizing yourself in the mirror anymore. I sang softly, my voice rough with sleep and emotion. "That's new," Vincenzo said from the doorway, making me jump. He stood there in his robe, hair messy, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. "Just something I've been working on," I said, setting the guitar aside. He sat next to me on the couch, closer than necessary. "It's good. Sad, but good." I looked down at my hands, calluses fading from lack of real playing. I miss it sometimes, singing for myself, not being anyone's wife. His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You're not happy here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I don't know what I am anymore." He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You're Maya, the girl with the sad songs and brave eyes. That hasn't changed." But it had. Everything had changed. I stood up, needing space between us. "I need to get out for a while. Just be me again." I expected him to argue, to remind me of the dangers, of Paolo's warnings. Instead, he just nodded. "Take Marco with you," he said, naming one of his security men. "He'll keep his distance." 2 hours later, I was back in the subway station where Vincenzo had first heard me sing. Marco stood far enough away that I could pretend he wasn't there, his broad shoulders and watchful eyes blending into the crowd of morning commuters. I set up my guitar case, feeling strange. My clothes were too nice now, my nails too perfect, my hair too shiny. I didn't look like I belonged here anymore. But when I started to play, none of that mattered. The music filled the space, bouncing off the tiled walls, wrapping around me like an old blanket. People stopped to listen, some dropping dollars into my case out of habit, not knowing I wore a watch that cost more than their monthly rent. I closed my eyes and sang, letting myself remember the girl I used to be, hungry, scared, but free in a way I wasn't anymore. When I opened my eyes after a song, I spotted Agent Reeves leaning against a column, watching me. My fingers stumbled on the strings. I nodded to Marco, who moved closer, his hand inside his jacket. "Nice to see you performing again," Reeves said, dropping $1 in my case. "Music seems to be in your blood." "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Just checking in." His eyes flicked to Marco, then back to me. "Seeing if you've thought about our conversation." "There's nothing to think about." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Isn't there? The grand jury convenes next month. Your husband is the main target." My heart skipped a beat. Vincenzo hadn't mentioned any grand jury. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, packing up my guitar though I'd been playing less than an hour. "Don't you? The raids on his warehouses last week? The arrests of 3 of his captains? Reeves stepped closer, his voice dropping. We're closing in, Maya. When it happens, you don't want to be standing next to him. I looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Leave me alone. I'll be around, he said, slipping his card into my pocket. When you're ready. Marco drove me back to the penthouse in silence, but I could feel his disapproval. When we arrived, he spoke for the first time. You shouldn't go back there, it's not safe. I just needed to play, I said, my voice small even to my own ears. There are places to play that aren't crawling with feds, he replied, his hand on the car door. The boss has enemies everywhere now, and they're all watching you. Inside, the penthouse felt colder than before, its luxuries suddenly suffocating. I wandered through rooms that still didn't feel like mine, touching things that belonged to a life I was playing at, not living. In Vincenzo's study, I found newspaper clippings spread across his desk. Headlines about federal investigations, arrests, grand jury proceedings. Names I recognized from dinner conversations were circled in red. I picked up one article with a photo of Agent Reeves standing outside a courthouse. Finding anything interesting? Vincenzo's voice came from behind me. I turned, the article still in my hand. Why didn't you tell me about the grand jury? It's not your concern. He crossed the room and took the paper from my fingers, setting it back on the desk. Not my concern? I'm your wife. If you go to prison... I'm not going to prison. His voice was steel. You can't know that. I've survived worse than overeager federal agents, he said, his hand cupping my cheek. Trust me. Trust. Such a simple word for such a complicated feeling. Did I trust him? Could I? Should I? I met Agent Reeves again today, I admitted. At the subway station. Vincenzo's hand dropped, his face changing in an instant. What did he want? The same as before, for me to turn on you. And what did you say? His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. I told him to leave me alone, but he knows about the grand jury, about the raids, about everything. Vincenzo turned away, running a hand through his hair. You shouldn't have gone back there. It's too exposed. I needed to breathe, I said, frustration bubbling up. To remember who I am outside of all this. And who is that? He asked, turning back to me. The girl singing for Pennies? You were starving, Maya. 1 bad month away from the streets. His words stung because they were true. At least I was free. Free to what? Fail? Struggle? Give up on your dreams? He gestured around us. I've given you everything. I never asked for any of this. My voice rose, bouncing off the walls. I never asked for fancy clothes or jewelry or people watching my every move. No, you just wanted money and security. The rest came with it. He shot back. We stood there, the truth of our arrangement hanging between us like a knife. He was right. I had made a deal. I had chosen this, but things had changed. I had changed. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. For the first time since I'd known him, Vincenzo looked uncertain. What are you saying? I'm saying I need time, space, to think about what I want, who I am. You're my wife, he said, as if that answered everything. Am I? Really? Or am I just playing a part in your story? I stepped back, creating distance between us. I don't even know what's real anymore. What started as an arrangement feels different now. But is it real? Or just another role we've convinced ourselves is true? He reached for me, but I moved away. Maya, I need to go, I said, the words rushing out before I could stop them. Just for a while, to clear my head. His face hardened. If you walk out that door, Maya, you can't come back. This life doesn't allow for uncertainty. I looked at him standing there, powerful and alone, and felt my heart splitting in two. Part of me wanted to stay, to fall into his arms and forget the outside world existed. But another part, the part that had survived on her own before him, needed to breathe free air again. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and walked past him to our bedroom. My hands shook as I packed a small bag, just enough clothes for a few days, my toiletries, my wallet. I didn't take any of the expensive things he'd given me, just what I'd brought with me or bought with the money that was truly mine. Vincenzo watched from the doorway, his face a mask I couldn't read. "Where will you go?" "I still have my old apartment," I said, surprised he hadn't gotten rid of it. "I kept paying the rent," he admitted, "just in case. Just in case this happened. Just in case I left." The thought made my throat tight. As I walked to the door, guitar case in one hand, small bag in the other, he spoke again. "The people who want to hurt me won't care that you've left. They'll still see you as a way to get to me." "Is that a threat?" I asked, turning to look at him one last time. "A warning," he replied, his eyes sad. "Be careful, Maya." I nodded and stepped into the elevator, watching his face disappear as the doors closed. Tears blurred my vision as the elevator descended, taking me away from the life I'd been living and back toward the one I'd left behind. My old apartment was exactly as I remembered. Small, slightly musty, with water stains on the ceiling, and a draft from the window that wouldn't quite close. But it was mine. I sat on my lumpy futon, guitar across my lap, and felt like I was mourning someone who was still alive. 3 days passed in my old apartment. 3 days of silence, of no calls from Vincenzo, of staring at walls that seemed smaller than I remembered. I threw myself into music, writing songs about loving someone you shouldn't, about choices with no right answers. My fingers blistered again from playing too long, a pain that felt oddly comforting in its familiarity. On the 4th morning, I woke to pounding on my door. My heart leaped, thinking it might be Vincenzo. But when I looked through the peephole, it was my neighbor, Mrs. Petrovich, her face creased with worry. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting a newspaper at me when I opened the door. There, on the front page, was Vincenzo's face, stern and unsmiling, as police led him in handcuffs through a crowd of reporters. The headline read, "Moretti Empire Crumbles, Crime Boss Arrested on Federal Charges." My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, the newspaper clutched in my trembling hands. The article detailed early morning raids, sealed indictments, charges that could put Vincenzo away for decades. I read every word twice, looking for some hint that it was all a mistake. "Your husband, yes?" Mrs. Petrovich asked, peering down at me. "The man in nice car who comes sometimes?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Police asked questions yesterday," she continued, her accent thick with concern. "About you, about him." I say nothing. Good neighbors mind own business. "Thank you," I managed to whisper. After she left, I sat frozen on the floor, the newspaper spread before me. What should I do? Go to him? Stay away? Would they arrest me too? Did I even still matter to him? My phone rang, startling me, an unknown number. My hand shook as I answered. "Maya?" Paolo's voice tense and hushed. "Don't hang up." "What happened?" I asked, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "They took him this morning. The feds had someone on the inside. They know everything." Is he okay?" Paolo's laugh was bitter. "He's being processed at the federal building downtown. They're denying him bail." "What can I do?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Silence stretched between us, then, "Nothing. Stay away. It's too dangerous now." "Paolo, he doesn't want you involved." Those were his exact words. "Keep Maya out of it." His voice softened slightly. "He's protecting you. Even now." The call ended, leaving me alone with the newspaper and a hollow feeling in my chest. I turned on the TV to find every channel showing the same images: Vincenzo in handcuffs, federal agents carrying boxes from his offices, reporters speculating about the fall of one of the city's most powerful crime families. I watched for hours, numb and aching at the same time. As evening fell, a new knock came at my door. This time, I knew who it was before I looked. Agent Reeves stood in my hallway, looking tired but satisfied. "May I come in?" I stepped back to let him pass, too exhausted to argue. He glanced around my tiny apartment, taking in the peeling paint and secondhand furniture. "Quite a step down from the penthouse," he remarked. "What do you want?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. "To offer you a deal." He sat on my futon without being invited. "Your husband is facing multiple life sentences. The evidence against him is overwhelming." My stomach twisted. I still don't see what that has to do with me. "We want his suppliers, Maya, the people even higher up the chain. Vincenzo knows who they are, where they operate, how they move their money. So ask him." Reeves smiled without humor. "He's not talking, but he might, for the right incentive." Understanding dawned on me. "You want to use me to make him talk." "We want to offer him a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, but he needs to know it's worth his while." Reeves leaned forward. "If he gives us what we want, he could be out in 10 years instead of spending the rest of his life behind bars." 10 years. The number hung in the air between us. 10 years of visiting rooms and phone calls through glass. 10 years of waiting. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we can't help him." Reeves stood, straightening his jacket. "Think about it. We can put you in witness protection after. Give you a new start, away from all this." After he left, I paced my tiny apartment, my mind racing. The walls seemed to close in around me, the ceiling lower than before, the air thicker. I couldn't stay here, waiting for news, wondering what was happening to Vincenzo. I grabbed my coat and headed out into the night. The air was cold, biting at my cheeks as I walked with no destination in mind. My feet carried me toward the subway, down familiar steps to the platform where I'd once played for strangers, where Vincenzo had first heard me sing. The station was nearly empty at this late hour. I sat on a bench, watching trains come and go, feeling the rush of air as they passed. My reflection in the dark window across the tracks looked like a ghost, pale, uncertain, fading. What was I doing? Running away hadn't solved anything. It had just left me alone with questions I couldn't answer and feelings I couldn't name. I thought about Vincenzo in a cell somewhere, surrounded by guards and concrete, far from his art and books and the view of the park he loved. I'd been so focused on what our relationship meant for me that I hadn't stopped to think about what it meant for him. Had it just been business at first? A convenient arrangement that solved a problem? Maybe. But something had changed along the way. For both of us. The next morning, I called the number Agent Reeves had left me. "I want to see him," I said when he answered. "That can be arranged," he replied too quickly. "If you're ready to help us." "I want to see him first. Then I'll decide." The Federal Detention Center was a gray block of a building, surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. I followed a guard through metal detectors and locked doors, my footsteps echoing on concrete floors. The visiting room was divided by a thick glass wall with small booths on either side, phones hanging on the walls. I sat at booth number 7, my heart pounding as I waited. Then a door opened on the other side, and there he was, Vincenzo, in a baggy orange jumpsuit that hung on his frame. His face was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble on his cheeks. But his back was straight as he walked to the booth, his eyes finding mine through the glass. He picked up the phone on his side. I did the same. You shouldn't have come, he said, his voice rough but still his. I had to. His eyes searched my face. Did they force you? No. I asked to see you. He nodded once, relief flickering across his features. You're okay? No one's bothered you? Always worried about me, even now. I'm fine, but you? I've been in worse places. A small smile touched his lips. The food was better in county, though. I pressed my hand against the glass between us. After a moment, he raised his to match, our palms separated by inches of unbreakable barrier. The FBI wants me to convince you to take a deal, I said, getting to the point. To testify against your suppliers. His face hardened. And what did you tell them? That I needed to see you first. He leaned closer to the glass. Listen to me, Maya. These people I work for, they don't forgive betrayal. If I talk, they'll kill me, deal or no deal. And then they'll kill anyone I ever cared about. Including me, I whispered. Especially you. His voice was gentle but firm. The best thing you can do is walk away. Forget you ever knew me. Use the money in your account to start over somewhere else. Is that what you want? I asked, my throat tight. For me to disappear? What I want doesn't matter anymore. He looked tired suddenly, older than his years. I've done things I can't undo, Maya. Things you'd hate me for if you knew. I know who you are, I said, echoing words I'd said before. I've always known. No, he said, shaking his head. You know the man I let you see. There's so much more. So much darkness. Then tell me, I challenged. Tell me the worst thing you've ever done. He was silent for a long moment. I can't burden you with that. It's my choice to make. I leaned forward. All this time, you've been making decisions for both of us. What's best for me? What's safest? What I should know or not know. But I'm here now, asking you to trust me with the truth. Why? He asked, genuine confusion in his eyes. Why would you want to know? Because I need to make a choice based on who you really are, not who I imagine you to be. I took a deep breath. Because despite everything, I love you. And I need to know if the man I love is real, or just another role you played. Something broke in his expression then, the mask falling away completely. He's real, he said softly. More real than I've been in 15 years. A guard tapped his watch, indicating our time was almost up. Listen to me, Vincenzo said urgently. There's a way out of this, but I need time. Don't talk to the FBI again. Don't make any deals. Just wait. Wait for what? For me to fix this. His eyes held mine. Do you trust me, Maya? Really trust me? The question hung between us, heavy with all that had happened, all that might still happen. Did I trust him? This man who had swept me into his dangerous world, who had lied and hidden parts of himself, who had also protected me and seen me when no one else did. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I trust you. Relief washed over his face. Then go home. Our home. Wait there. The guard came to take him away. As Vincenzo stood, he pressed his hand to the glass one more time. Whatever happens, he said, know that loving you was the most honest thing I've ever done. Then he was gone, led through a heavy door that closed with a final sounding clang. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. When I walked out of the detention center, Agent Reeves was waiting by his car. Well, he asked, did you convince him? I looked at him, seeing for the first time how little he understood about Vincenzo, about me, about us. I'm not doing this, I said. Find another way to build your case. As I walked past him, he called after me. He'll spend his life in prison, Maya. Is that what you want? I didn't answer, didn't look back. Instead, I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the penthouse. Not my old apartment, not Vincenzo's place, but our home. The trial lasted 11 months, each day stretching into the next like one long, bad dream. I sat in the same seat in the courtroom every day, third row back, directly behind Vincenzo. Close enough to catch his scent when guards led him past, far enough that we couldn't touch. Every morning he would turn slightly in his chair, his eyes finding mine for just a moment. A small nod. I'm still here. We're still fighting. The evidence against him seemed endless. Witness testimonies, financial records, surveillance photos. His lawyer, a thin man with tired eyes and expensive suits, fought hard. Too many charges to dismiss them all, he'd told me one day outside the courthouse. The goal now was damage control. On the last day of the trial, Vincenzo did something that shocked everyone. He changed his plea to guilty on several of the lesser charges. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as he stood before the judge, his voice clear and firm as he admitted to racketeering, tax evasion, and conspiracy. But there was a twist no one saw coming. As part of his plea, he provided evidence against several high-ranking officials who had been protecting his operation for years. Not the suppliers Agent Reeves had wanted, but corrupt cops, judges, even a state senator. People who should have been upholding the law but had been breaking it instead. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. I wore the blue dress Vincenzo had always liked, my hands twisting the simple gold band he'd given me the night before his arrest, a real ring to replace the flashy diamond I'd returned months ago. 8 years, with possibility of parole after 5 for cooperation with ongoing investigations into public corruption. 8 years. Not forever, but not tomorrow either. I watched Vincenzo's shoulders relax slightly at the number. He'd been expecting worse. We both had. They gave us 5 minutes together before they took him away, the first time we'd been in the same room without glass between us since his arrest. The guard stood by the door, trying to look like he wasn't listening. "I'll wait," I said before Vincenzo could speak. "However long it takes." He touched my face, his fingers gentle on my cheek. 5 years is a long time, Maya. Not so long, I replied, trying to smile. I waited 27 years to find you in the first place. His eyes, always so guarded, were open now, showing everything he felt. When I get out, things will be different. I can't go back to how it was before. I don't want you to, I said simply. He kissed me then, soft and quick, mindful of the watching guard. I made arrangements, he whispered against my hair. Paolo knows what to do. Then they took him, and I was alone again, the ghost of his touch still warm on my skin. The first year was the hardest. The penthouse sold quickly, most of its contents seized by the government. I moved into a small apartment near the park with just a few things I'd been allowed to keep. My guitar, some clothes, a handful of books Vincenzo had given me. Paolo helped me set up a small cafe with money Vincenzo had hidden away in my name years ago, legitimate funds the feds couldn't touch. I named it Vesuvio's, a private joke between Vincenzo and me, a reminder of where we began. The cafe had a small stage in the corner where I played sometimes in the evenings, singing new songs about redemption and second chances. Some people recognized me as Moretti's wife, but mostly I was just Maya again, the girl who sang and served coffee and minded her own business. I visited Vincenzo every week, driving 3 hours each way to the federal prison upstate. We talked about books he was reading, songs I was writing, the small successes of the cafe. Never about the past, never about the life he'd left behind. That door was closed. "You look good," he said during one visit, studying my face through the visiting room window. "Happy even." "I'm getting there," I admitted. "The cafe helps. Having purpose." "You could still have more," he said, his voice careful. A different life. Without the shadow of my name hanging over you. I understood what he was offering. Freedom. Permission to walk away. To start over without him. A gift only someone who truly loved me would give. But I'd made my choice long ago, in that cold detention center when I'd pressed my hand to the glass. I have exactly the life I want, I told him. It's just on pause for a few more years. The cafe thrived, becoming a neighborhood favorite. I hired a manager to handle the day-to-day operation so I could focus on music. My songs started to get noticed, not the kind of fame I'd once dreamed of, but a quiet respect from people who mattered in the industry. I recorded an EP, then a full album. Critics called my voice haunting and authentic. They said I sang like someone who had lived through something real. They had no idea. Paolo kept his distance but checked in every month or so. He never mentioned Vincenzo's old business, and I never asked. Whatever arrangement they had made seemed to be working. The threats Vincenzo had feared never materialized. The powerful people who might have wanted revenge stayed away. 3 years into Vincenzo's sentence, Agent Reeves showed up at the cafe one rainy afternoon. He looked older, more tired, his suit as rumpled as ever. "Nice place," he said, glancing around at the warm lights and mismatched furniture I'd carefully chosen. "You've done well for yourself." "What do you want?" I asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of him without being asked. "Just checking in." He took a sip, his eyebrows rising in appreciation. "Good coffee." "I didn't build this place with drug money, if that's what you're wondering," I said, keeping my voice low. "Everything here is clean." "I know." He set down the cup. "Your husband made sure of that." I studied his face, looking for the catch. "Why are you really here?" Reeves sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "The corruption case your husband helped with, it's wrapping up. Last defendant pleaded guilty yesterday." He paused. "His cooperation was instrumental, more than we expected." My heart beat faster. "What does that mean?" "It means the parole board will get a very positive recommendation from the U.S. Attorney's Office." He stood, leaving money for the coffee. He could be home by Christmas. Home. The word echoed in my mind long after Reeves had gone. Not the penthouse with its marble floors and Central Park views, but wherever I was, because that's what we'd become to each other. Home. Christmas came and went with Vincenzo still behind bars, then New Year's, then Valentine's Day. I tried not to hope too much, not to count days or make plans, but I started keeping his favorite books by the bed, bought an extra coffee mug, left space in the closet. Then one Tuesday in March, exactly 4 years and 2 months into his sentence, the buzzer to my apartment rang. I was in the middle of writing a new song, my hair a mess, wearing old sweatpants and one of Vincenzo's sweaters I'd kept all this time. I pressed the intercom. "Yes?" No answer, just the sound of breathing. I ran down the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, my heart in my throat. And there he was, standing in the lobby, a small duffel bag at his feet. Thinner, grayer, but unmistakably Vincenzo. "You're here," I whispered, not quite believing it. "Early parole," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Good behavior." I threw myself into his arms, feeling them close around me, strong and sure despite the years apart. We stood like that for a long time, hearts beating against each other, breathing each other in. "I didn't think they'd really let you out early," I said against his chest. "I had help," he admitted. "Your friend Agent Reeves put in a good word." I looked up at him, surprised. "He's not my friend." "No, but he's a decent man, in his way, and he saw what I was willing to give up for you." We went upstairs to the apartment, our apartment now. It was small compared to the penthouse, just one bedroom with windows that faced another building. But it was clean and bright, and filled with things I loved. "It's perfect," Vincenzo said, looking around. "Like you." I laughed at that. "I'm far from perfect. We both know that." "Perfect for me, then." He touched my face, his fingers gentle. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he pulled a small, worn piece of paper. I unfolded it to find handwritten sheet music, a song I didn't recognize. "I wrote it in there," he explained. "The guards let me have a pencil sometimes, for good behavior." I took out my guitar and played the notes, a simple melody that somehow captured everything: loss, waiting, hope, return. "It's beautiful," I said, tears in my eyes. "It's called Maya's Song." He sat beside me on the couch. "I thought maybe you could add words someday." We had dinner that night at the cafe, closed early for a private celebration. Paolo came, and Marco, and a few other friends who had stood by us. No champagne or fancy food, just good coffee and sandwiches, and a homemade cake the cafe's baker had made when she heard the news. "To new beginnings," Paolo toasted, raising his coffee cup. Later, back at the apartment, I asked Vincenzo the question that had been on my mind all day. "What happens now?" He took my hands in his. "Now we live, Maya, simply, quietly. I have a job lined up at a friend's bookstore. Nothing fancy, but honest work." "And you're okay with that? After everything you had?" His smile was gentle. "What I had was power built on fear. What I have now is a life built on love. It's not even a choice." I played my guitar that night as he sat by the window watching the city lights. Not for an audience or for money, just for us. And when I sang, it was a new song about finding home in another person, about choosing a smaller life that felt bigger in all the ways that mattered. Today marks 5 years since Vincenzo came home. My second album won a small award last month. His bookstore. Yes, his now. The owner retired and left it to him. Does steady business with a loyal clientele. We live simply in a slightly bigger apartment, with a view of trees instead of buildings. No one looks twice at us on the street. Just another middle-aged couple, walking hand in hand, stopping to listen when street musicians play. Some nights I still wonder if I made the right choice, loving a man with so much darkness in his past. But then I look at who we've become together. 2 people who saw each other at their worst and chose each other anyway, who built something new from the ashes of what burned. Isn't that what love is, in the end? Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone who makes you want to be better than you are, who sees the song in you when you've forgotten the melody. I still sing on street corners sometimes, for memory's sake, not for pennies anymore, but for the reminder of where I began, and how far I've come, how far we've come together.